What Jasmine Crockett just laid out about Kash Patel wasn't a rant, it was a record. And once you follow the facts she puts on the table, it becomes impossible to ignore what this moment says about the future of the FBI. Watch this carefully.
Man, oh man, there has been so much today, and I truly don't know where to start. So I'm just going to make sure that we start off with a few facts. So a couple of facts that we need to make clear for everyone is that, number one, Director Christopher Wray, when he was appointed to be the head of the FBI, was appointed by Donald Trump. Now, I will agree that I definitely take issue with a number of decisions that Donald Trump makes, especially when it comes to the people that he decides to appoint to very important positions, including this one, because I did have to make sure that I wasn't going crazy. But when I say that you are the least qualified FBI director in the history of the FBI, that is real, because you are the only one that never even served with the FBI prior to joining, yet we are supposed to believe that you were the greatest thing since sliced bread. I didn't ask you a question. Now, what I want to go through is to talk about why you are a failure and why, honestly, we just need to tell you bye-bye. I know that you got a little upset and you put on your show for your boss because it seems like you're trying to save your job when it came to talking to Senator Booker yesterday. But let's go through some of your failures. So before you were even confirmed, and I think one of my colleague from Georgia, pointed out that you were already targeting career officials so that you could direct illegal firings. Mind you, these cases that you were so upset about, which are the ones tied to Trump, the cases came through his handpicked FBI director. And frankly, when people sit around and say things like, oh, you know, we're happy because now we feel safe, I don't know who feels safe in this country except for the white supremacists, because I specifically as a black woman definitely don't feel safe. And frankly, my colleagues have been real nice to you today, and I applaud them, but I don't have the same demeanor because I know that multiple colleagues on this side of the aisle have faced death threats. In fact, somebody tried to kill one of my colleagues, and frankly, I don't know if this FBI or under your leadership, if those people would have been caught. I don't have any confidence in you. And if we start talking about the reasons that I lack confidence, we could start with you not just wanting to acknowledge some simple facts. Simple facts like the vast majority of the threats are coming from right-wing extremism. And I know my colleagues have tried to stress this, but I decided that I would maybe do it in a different way. Number one, I have a couple of UCs. Kim Buck, one of multiple Republicans receiving death threats for voting against Jim Jordan as House Speaker.
Without objection.
Another one, Republican lawmaker says she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan in Speaker's race.
Without objection.
In addition, there was another one from another colleague who now is leaving Congress because they said that they were calling his wife anonymously and threatening her life to the extent that she ended up sleeping with a firearm.
Without objection.
Okay. So here's the deal. How are we supposed to have confidence when you're sitting up here telling the Senate yesterday that it will take you 14 years before you can get the FBI fully staffed to do their jobs? You're also now redirecting resources so that they can go and play ICE agents on the streets. You're getting rid of your most qualified people. And even when it came down to somebody that you consider to be a friend, you were posted up having some fancy dinner to the extent that you posted not only once erroneously, you posted twice erroneously as it relates to catching somebody, and then you want to go and say, let me take a victory lap, because honestly, if it wasn't for parents deciding that they were going to turn in their child, it seems like y'all wouldn't have got there, even though he literally confessed online. So I'm confused about what it is that the FBI is doing except for trying to put on a show for the apprentice or whatever you want to call him. The day after all of this took place, there was domestic terrorism that was taking place at HBCUs. They were targeted. Yet I didn't hear anything from the FBI about what was going on. And again, black people kept saying, how did we end up in this? Because the numbers are so very clear that white supremacy is a problem. And honestly, I've not heard anything out of you today that makes me believe that you're going to do anything about the white supremacy problem, the one that is leading to children being killed, children being shot, as well as members of their community as they're worshiping in their churches.
What makes Jasmine Crockett's exchange so powerful isn't the volume of her voice or the sharpness of her words, it's the structure of her argument. She doesn't begin with opinion, she begins with facts, and that's intentional. She starts by reminding the public that Christopher Wray, the FBI director whose tenure Republicans now routinely attack, was appointed by Donald Trump himself. That matters because it dismantles a core talking point before it even has a chance to stand. This isn't about Democrats rejecting Republican appointees on principle. It's about standards, and whether those standards still exist. From there, Crockett introduces what may be the most consequential point of the entire exchange. Kash Patel would be the first FBI director in history with no prior service inside the FBI. That's not symbolism. The FBI is one of the most complex law enforcement institutions in the world, operating at the intersection of intelligence, counterterrorism, civil rights, and domestic extremism. Leading it without institutional experience isn't innovation, it's an experiment, and one with national consequences. But Crockett doesn't stop at qualifications. She shifts to outcomes, which is where the conversation becomes far more unsettling. She outlines a pattern of behavior that suggests the FBI under Patel would not be insulated from political pressure, but shaped by it. Allegations of targeting career officials, discussions of illegal firings, retaliation against people associated with investigations tied to Donald Trump, investigations that originated under Trump's own hand-picked leadership. Then comes the part that moves this from abstract governance to lived reality. Crockett speaks as a Black woman in America who does not feel safe, and she explains why. She references real death threats against members of Congress, including Republicans, threats tied directly to right-wing extremism. These aren't hypotheticals. These are documented cases. Lawmakers driven from office, families sleeping next to firearms, colleagues who narrowly survived assassination attempts. And this is where her critique of Patel becomes structural, not personal. She challenges his refusal to plainly acknowledge that the overwhelming majority of modern domestic terrorism threats originate from right-wing extremism. That refusal matters because law enforcement priorities follow leadership narratives. When leaders downplay the source of violence, resources shift away from where the danger actually is. Crockett raises another alarming issue, staffing. Patel reportedly told the Senate it would take 14 years to fully staff the FBI. 14 years, at a time when domestic extremism, cybercrime, foreign interference, and political violence are escalating, not declining. Simultaneously, she points out that experienced FBI personnel are being redirected away from investigative work and toward immigration enforcement roles, hollowing out the Bureau's core mission. She then exposes what she sees as performative leadership, public victory laps taken over arrests that were not the result of FBI excellence, but of civilians turning in their own family members after online confessions. When optics replace substance, institutions weaken, and when institutions weaken, communities pay the price. Perhaps the most haunting part of her statement comes near the end. After a domestic terrorism incident targeting an HBCU, she notes the absence of urgency, visibility, or public reassurance from the FBI. For communities historically targeted by extremist violence, silence isn't neutral, it's a message. Crockett's argument ultimately lands on one unavoidable question. If leadership cannot acknowledge the primary sources of violence, cannot protect its own personnel, cannot retain expertise, and cannot reassure vulnerable communities, what exactly is it doing? This wasn't about partisan anger, it was about institutional trust. And once that trust is gone, restoring it takes far more than slogans or loyalty to political figures. If you care about public safety, democratic accountability, and whether federal institutions serve the people rather than power, this moment deserves your attention. Stay engaged, share this analysis, and keep watching closely, because the decisions being made now will shape whose lives are protected and whose warnings are ignored.